The galaxy did not beg often. For 1,200 years, the Hall of Namaris had been a place of power. Its glass walls had heard peace treaties, victory songs, angry debates, and promises made by leaders who believed the future could be controlled. Today, no one believed that anymore. Ambassador Lyra Vey stood beneath the great star map with a small silver ring hidden in her palm. It had belonged to her son, who died on a border station during the 3rd year of the war. She had carried it every day since, but never during a public session. Today, she needed the weight of it. Behind her, the map showed what remained of the United Worlds. Green meant safe space. Gray meant worlds already lost. Black meant the Varkun Tide. For 9 years, black had spread across the stars. It had taken border colonies, mining moons, garden planets, and bright stations where children once watched ships arrive. Wherever the Varkun passed, messages ended, cities went dark, families became lists of names, whole cultures disappeared without even a final scream reaching the stars. Lyra looked at the delegates seated before her. Some had feathers, some had scales, some had faces no human child would recognize as faces, but grief had made them all look the same. Tired, empty, waiting for the end. "We are losing," Lyra said. The words struck harder because no one argued. "Our last defense line is the Arven Gate. If the Varkun break it, the inner worlds will fall within 1 year. After that, there will be nowhere left to run." A low sound moved through the hall. It was grief, too large for any one language. Lyra folded her hands around the ring so no one would see them shake. She had written a grand speech full of courage and noble duty. At sunrise, she destroyed it. Beautiful words could not hold back a tide. "There is one option left," she said. "We ask Earth." The silence sharpened. Delegate Vorin rose from his seat. His stone-gray skin reflected the black light of the map. "Humans have never joined our wars. In 400 years, they sent doctors, engineers, and quiet observers, never warships." "I know," Lyra said. "Then why ask them now?" Lyra turned toward the shrinking green cluster. She thought of her son's last message, 3 words sent before the station vanished. "Hold the line." "Because this is no longer a request for help. It is a request to survive." The vote passed before the hour ended. The message to Earth was careful, respectful, and desperate without sounding broken. It explained the lost fleets, the dead worlds, and the final defense line. It asked for 500 ships. Earth replied in 6 minutes. "Sending 1 vessel. The Ashen Promise will arrive on 5th day." Lyra read the message again. 1 vessel. Not a fleet, not a squadron. 1 human ship. She closed her fingers around the ring until it hurt. Somewhere beyond the cold outer stars, that single ship had already begun its journey. But when the Ashen Promise arrived, it did not look like a rescue. It looked like humanity had opened a door it had kept locked for centuries. 5th day came without comfort. At the Arven Gate, 46 warships of the United Worlds waited in defensive formation. Once, that number would have filled commanders with pride. Now it seemed painfully small against the black wave moving across long-range sensors. Lyra Vey stood on the command deck of the Bright Spear. She had not slept. Her tea had gone cold, but she kept holding the cup because empty hands felt too honest. In her other hand, hidden in her sleeve, was the silver ring. Around her, officers checked reports they already knew by heart. The The Varkun were closing. Thousands of enemy ships moved in perfect order, calm and patient, like a tide that had never failed to reach the shore. Then the sensor officer sat straighter. Unknown vessel entering from Earth direction. Every voice stopped. On the main screen, one point of light appeared at the edge of the system. It slowed, turned, and approached without hurry. The human ship had arrived. The Ashen Promise did not shine. It carried no banners, no visible weapons, and no proud armor plates. Its hull was dark, smooth, almost plain. Yet Lyra felt pressure build in her chest as she watched it. The ship looked less like a machine and more like a secret that had finally chosen to move. Admiral Kale Dravos stood beside her, his broad shoulders tense. That is Earth's answer? Lyra could not defend what she did not understand. The human ship docked with perfect control. No long approach, no uncertain correction. It connected to the station and went still. Minutes later, 3 humans entered the meeting chamber. Captain Mara Holt came first. She was not tall, but she had the quiet weight of someone who had already walked through fire and made peace with smoke. Her black uniform carried only one silver mark, a broken circle over her heart. Lyra noticed the mark because Mara touched it once before speaking, the way people touch a wound that has healed badly. Behind her came Elias Reed, young, tired, and holding a datapad too tightly, and Sana Vale, whose calm eyes measured every corner of the room. Lyra gave the formal welcome. She spoke of survival, alliance, and gratitude. She kept her voice steady, though disappointment burned behind every word. Captain Holt listened with respect. When Lyra finished, Holt said, "Show me the battle map." Admiral Kale Dravos frowned. "You bring one ship and you ask for a map?" "Yes," Holt said. The answer was so simple that anger had nowhere to land. They gathered around the tactical table. The Varkun fleet appeared in red-black light, thousands of enemy ships surrounding the path to the Arvin Gate. Captain Holt studied the display for less than a minute. Then she pointed at 11 vessels hidden deep inside the formation. "Those are not normal warships." Lyra leaned closer. "What are they?" "Memory anchors," Holt said. "The Varkun do not command their fleet the way you think. They store battle direction inside these 11 ships. Break the anchors, and the tide forgets how to move." Dravos stared at her. "You knew this before coming here?" Captain Holt met his eyes. "We knew before you asked." Cold moved through Lyra's body. Then Holt opened a locked human file, and Lyra saw proof that Earth had prepared for this enemy long before the United Worlds knew its name.
Captain Holt placed her hand on the tactical table. A blue scanner passed over her palm. The room lights dimmed, and the enemy map vanished. In its place, a human file opened with a quiet tone. Project Nightbell. The title sounded harmless. The fear it created did not. Admiral Dravos stepped forward. "Explain." Holt looked at Lyra first, as if the answer belonged to her more than anyone else. "It began as a warning project. At the start, we had only pieces." Images appeared above the table, old star charts, lost ships, broken signals from unmapped space, empty colonies with working power grids, and no people. At first, the clues looked scattered. Then, the file connected them. Lines stretched across the stars and pointed into the same dark region. Lyra's voice came out thin. "Earth knew something was coming?" "We suspected," Elias Reed said. "A human colony ship vanished near the outer dark. Then 2 research stations stopped reporting. Later, we found a planet with full cities and no bodies, no battle marks, just absence." Sana Vale touched the controls, and a ruined world appeared. clean streets stretched under an orange sky. Doors stood open, machines still hummed. It looked as if an entire population had stepped outside for a moment and never returned. Several delegates backed away. Admiral Dravos slammed one fist onto the table. "You kept this from us?" Captain Holt's face tightened. For the first time, Lyra saw grief under the discipline. "We did not know enough to warn you without spreading panic." 8 billion are dead, Dravos said. "Do not make careful words sound clean." Holt was silent for one breath. Then she said, "Earth paid too." The table changed again. A small human system appeared far beyond common roots. Solace reach. 32 years ago, the Varkun found one of our hidden colonies. 2 million people lived there. My older sister was one of them. She taught children how to read old Earth poems. Her voice stayed steady, which made the pain worse. "We sent 12 ships to defend them. None returned." The anger in the room weakened. It did not disappear, but grief had entered the space between them. Holt continued. "After Solace Reach, Earth stopped guessing. We studied every lost signal, every empty world, and every pattern the Varkun left behind. We learned they do not only destroy defenses, they steal direction. They make civilizations forget how to resist." Lyra looked at the 11 memory anchors glowing inside the enemy fleet. "So the Ashen Promise was built for this?" "Yes," Holt replied. "Not to defeat every ship, to cut the memory that holds the tide together." Lyra wanted hope. Instead, fear came first. Humans had waited, watched, and built in silence for decades. Pain had taught them patience, and patience had become dangerous. Admiral Dravos asked, "If your one ship fails?" Holt turned toward the viewport, where the Ashen Promise sat in shadow. Her fingers touched the broken circle on her uniform again. "Then Earth stops hiding." Lyra did not understand that warning until the Ashen Promise woke, and every united warship suddenly lost power. The lights on the bright sphere dimmed first. They flickered once, returned in a dull red glow, then every control screen filled with warnings. Engines failed, shields dropped, weapon locks vanished. Across the command deck, trained officers fought panic with discipline and almost won. "Main drives offline. Defense grid not responding. Fleet channels blocked." Admiral Dravos turned toward the viewport, where the Ashen Promise rested in its dock. "What has that ship done?" Lyra held the command rail. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Captain Holt's voice came through every speaker. "United Fleet, remain steady. This is a controlled safety lock. Your systems will return in 90 seconds. Dravos leaned toward the console. "You disabled my fleet?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because the Varkun are listening." No one moved. Sana Vale spoke next. "The memory anchors learn from active command systems. Every time your ships build a formation, they read the pattern. Every time you prepare a defense, they predict where it will fail." Lyra looked at the frozen tactical map. For 9 years, the United Worlds had planned, adjusted, and fought with everything they had. The Varkun had not only beaten them, they had studied them during each defeat. The thought made her feel sick. Holt continued. "We needed the enemy to believe you were preparing the same way again. Now they will search for a pattern that no longer exists." The 90 seconds ended. Power returned in a rush. Engines came alive, shields rebuilt, screens cleared. But the fleet had changed. Each united ship now carried a silent course adjustment. Their formation opened, creating a narrow path from the Arvan Gate toward the center of the Varkun Tide. A path for one vessel. Lyra whispered, "You are sending the Ashen Promise alone." "No," Holt said. "We are sending it where your fleet would only become noise."
On the screen, the human vessel detached from the station. For a heartbeat, it seemed ordinary. Then the hull shifted. Smooth plates moved like dark water. Hidden seams opened, and blue-white light burned from within. The ship no longer looked plain. It looked like something built by people who had imagined the end of the world and prepared an answer. Even Dravos fell quiet. The Ashen Promise turned toward the enemy. Captain Holt spoke once more. This time her voice was softer, almost personal. "Solace Reach, we are coming back." Then the human vessel accelerated. It did not gather speed like other ships. It crossed distance as if space had briefly forgotten how wide it was. The stars bent around its course, and the command deck watched in stunned silence. The Varkun reacted. For the first time in 9 years, the tide shifted backward. Lyra felt a breath catch in her throat. The impossible truth appeared on every screen. The Varkun were not aiming at the human ship. They were trying to move away from it. The Varkun Tide had never moved backward. Every officer on the Bright Spear knew that. Every battle report confirmed it. The tide advanced, surrounded, broke defenses, and continued. Retreat did not belong to its history. Yet, the front line of enemy ships had shifted away from the Ashen Promise, only by a small distance, enough to change the room. A young officer whispered, "They fear it." The words sounded childish, yet no one corrected him. Fear was the only name that fit what their instruments showed. Admiral Dravos answered, "They do not fear, they calculate without hesitation." Captain Holt's voice came through the channel, "They remember." Lyra stepped closer to the console. "Remember what?" Elias Reed spoke next, emotion roughening his words. "The eliminated memory anchor." When the colony fell, one human ship survived 11 minutes longer than it should have. Before it died, it sent a broken defense code. The Varkun stored it. Sana added, "They think the Ashen Promise carries the same pattern." Lyra watched the dark human ship cut into the enemy's outer reach. "That should not be possible." "That is why it works," Holt said. The first Varkun weapons fired. Their aim was perfect for where the Ashen Promise should have been, but the ship was already elsewhere. It turned before shots released, shifted before traps closed, and crossed gaps no other vessel could have crossed. Then the human ship opened its first weapon. No missile launched, no bright beam struck. A pale ring expanded from its hull and passed through several enemy ships. For a moment, nothing changed. Then those ships went dark. Their engines died. Their lights faded one by one. "What did it do?" Dravos asked. Sana answered, "A forgetting pulse. It cuts a ship away from the anchors without destroying it." The Varkun formation trembled. Suddenly, the tide looked less like one body and more like thousands of pieces forced to think alone. But the 11 memory anchors responded. Deep in the enemy center, they brightened and turned their attention toward the human vessel. Their signals tightened around it like a net. Alarms shouted across the Bright Spear. "They are trapping her," an officer said. Dravos moved fast. "Prepare support fire." "No," Lyra said. The admiral looked at her, surprised. "She told us to wait," though her voice shook. On the screen, the Ashen Promise slowed. Enemy fire crowded around it. For one terrible moment, the human ship seemed caught inside a cage made of black light. Then Captain Holt spoke, almost too softly to hear. "Now remember us correctly." A sound entered the sensor feed. Not Varkun, not machine. A human song, broken by static, rose from inside the enemy network. Lyra looked down at the ring in her palm and thought of every last message the war had stolen. The dead colony of Solace Reach had answered within the Varkun mind.
The song came through the Varkun signals like a ghost. It was weak and full of static, but it carried a human melody. No speaker played it, no friendly ship transmitted it. The sound moved through the enemy network itself, rising from a place that should have held only stolen commands. Lyra felt tears sting her eyes before she understood why. Elias Reed said, "That is Solace Reach, their final broadcast." On the tactical table, the Varkun memory network appeared as 11 black knots tied together by lines of cold light. Now a small golden glow moved within those lines. Captain Holt's voice softened. When Solace Reach died, its defense program hid inside the Varkun stream. It was too damaged to fight, so it waited. "For what?" Lyra asked. Holt answered, "For someone to come back." The golden light struck the first memory anchor. The anchor did not explode, it simply stopped, as if a thought had been removed from it. Dozens of enemy ships connected to it drifted without orders. Then the second anchor began to fail. The Varkun answered with violence. Hundreds of ships fired at the Ashen Promise. White fire covered the screen. For 2 seconds, sensors lost the human ship completely. When the image returned, it was still moving, damaged, burning, unstopped. "She should be gone," Dravo said. "But she is not," Lyra whispered. The Ashen Promise pushed deeper. Its hull opened in strange angles, revealing blue light and hidden weapons. The old Solace signal grew louder. Beneath the song, words emerged. A child's voice said, "We are still here." Then another voice followed, older, gentle, and shaking through static. "Mara, if you hear this, read them the poems." Captain Holt did not speak for several seconds. Lyra knew without being told that the voice belonged to Mara's sister. Finally, Holt said, "I hear you." The third anchor died in golden light. Then Son of Vale shouted, "The tide is changing target." The tactical map shifted. Large groups of Varkun vessels were no longer chasing the human ship. They turned toward the Arvan Gate and the United Fleet behind it. Elias spoke fast. "They know the anchors are vulnerable. They're going for the gate directly." Behind the gate lay the inner worlds, homes, hospitals, ports, schools, and billions who had nowhere else to flee. Captain Holt said, "I need time." No one liked the answer. Lyra opened the fleet-wide channel. Her hands trembled, but she did not lower them. "All united ships," she said, "move forward, protect the Ashen Promise." Dravos turned toward her. In his eyes she saw grief, anger, and at last agreement. He gave the order. For the first time in years, the United Fleet advanced into the dark. But when the fleet entered the battle, the Varkun revealed the trap they had hidden for every world beyond the Arvan Gate.
46 United ships moved into open space. Some were old, some scarred from earlier battles. None of them should have been enough. Still, their engines burned bright as they formed a protective lane around the path of the Ashen Promise. On the bright spear, Lyra watched them go and felt pride mixed with dread. These were not symbols on a map. Each green mark carried crews, memories, families, and someone's last hope. Admiral Dravos stood rigid beside her. "All ships, shields forward, keep the center clear." The fleet answered at once. The Varkun Tide reacted. At first, Lyra thought their broken formation was scattering. Then the rear ranks opened and something enormous unfolded behind them. 11 hidden structures, carried in separate pieces, locked together with silent precision. A black ring formed in space. Son of Vale's voice cut through the channel. "That is not a normal weapon." Elias Reed sounded shaken. "It is tied to the jump routes. If it fires through the Arvan Gate, the blast will travel along every connected path." Lyra's stomach turned cold. To the inner worlds? Yes, Elias said. All of them. The command deck seemed to shrink around her. She pictured sleeping cities, crowded shelters, children holding emergency masks they did not yet understand. She pictured her son as a boy, asking why stars looked peaceful when wars happened between them. "How long?" Dravos asked. 7 minutes before full charge," an officer replied. Captain Holt spoke from the Ashen Promise. "The memory anchors are guiding it. I need 2 more anchors down before I can stop the shot." Dravos studied the distance. "You cannot reach them in 7 minutes." For once, Holt did not answer immediately. That silence frightened Lyra more than any warning alarm. The Ashen Promise was damaged and slowing. Fire trailed from its side. Varkun ships pressed close, forcing it away from the remaining anchors. "What do you need?" Lyra asked. "A distraction," Holt said. Dravos gave a harsh laugh. "Against thousands of ships?" "Not against them, against the anchors. Make the anchors look at you." Lyra understood. The Varkun learned from signals. They read commands, fear, movement, and defense patterns. If the United Fleet gave them a flood of information, the anchors might turn away from the human ship long enough. It was a dangerous idea. It was also the only one left. Lyra opened the fleet-wide channel. "For 9 years, the Varkun used our fear to defeat us. Today, we give them something else. All ships transmit every battle plan, false order, retreat code, and defense pattern. Flood them with all we are." Dravos looked at her, then nodded slowly. "Open your channels." The United Fleet lit up with signals. The memory anchors turned toward the noise. Through the gap, the Ashen Promise slipped forward like a blade in the dark. But inside the next anchor, Captain Holt found a stolen truth that made even humanity afraid. The Ashen Promise reached the 4th memory anchor through fire and wreckage. Its left engine burned unevenly. Large pieces of armor were gone. Still, the vessel held its course, moving with a stubborn grace that made Lyra ache to watch. Across the battlefield, the United Fleet filled space with signals. False retreats, old battle orders, emergency codes, and broken plans poured into the Varkun network. The memory anchors turned toward the storm, trying to understand it. Their attention split across thousands of false commands, each one demanding analysis, while the real danger moved behind them, quiet, wounded, and still coming closer. That gave Captain Holt the chance to strike. The forgetting pulse hit the 4th anchor. It went dark. Hundreds of enemy ships lost their path. A cheer began on the bright spear, but it died before it became strong. The 5th anchor opened its memory vault, and voices flooded every channel. Human voices, alien voices, children calling for parents, pilots saying goodbye, a mother singing through fear, a soldier laughing once before the sound broke into static. The lost were speaking from inside the Varkun system. Lyra covered her mouth. Admiral Dravos went pale. One voice came through clearer than the rest. "Kale, if this reaches anyone, tell him I was not afraid." The Admiral stopped breathing for a moment. "My brother," he whispered. No one touched him. His grief filled the deck like smoke. Captain Holt's voice came hard. "They are using the dead to hold us back." Sana Vale answered. "The anchor contains stolen mind patterns, damaged but real. If we destroy it directly, we erase what remains." Lyra stared at the timer. 4 minutes until the World Breaker fired. If they waited, billions could die. If they fired, the last traces of millions would vanish. The cruelty of it was almost beyond thought. Then Captain Holt said, "Solace Reach can carry them out." Elias Reed understood first. "Captain, the program will overload." "I know. It will end what is left of solace. The old human song returned, softer now. The child's voice spoke through the static. We waited to be useful. Mara's sister spoke once more, barely a breath in the signal. Mara, let us go. Captain Holt did not answer with words. She fired. Golden light moved through the fifth anchor, gathering the stolen voices like candles lifted from a dark room. The grief in the channel changed. It became quieter, less trapped. Then the anchor died. No explosion followed, only silence, deep and merciful. The child's voice faded last. We can rest now. Lyra wanted time to mourn, but war did not grant it. An officer shouted, "Worldbreaker has changed target." The tactical screen flashed. Target locked. Earth. Before anyone could breathe, the Varkun aimed their doomsday weapon at the world that had answered the United World's call.
For a moment, Lyra could not understand the words on the screen. Target locked. Earth. Earth was far from the Arvan Gate, far beyond the range of any ordinary weapon. But the Worldbreaker was not firing across normal space. It was connecting to the jump routes, the hidden roads between stars. If the beam entered the right path, distance would not matter. Admiral Dravos turned toward the human channel. His voice was rough. "Captain Holt, can it reach your home?" The pause was small. It was enough. "Yes," Holt said. The command deck grew colder. The Varkun had learned the Ashen Promise was not only a threat, it was proof of a species the Tide could not fully predict. To remove that unknown, they had chosen the source. Destroy Earth, break humanity, end the question before it spread. The Worldbreaker began to glow. 3 minutes remained. The Ashen Promise turned toward it, but the ship was badly hurt. Fire leaked from torn sections of hull. Its engine trail flickered. Varkun ships closed from every side. "She will not make it," someone whispered. Captain Holt heard. "United Fleet, I need a path." Lyra looked at the remaining ships. Many had cracked shields, some drifted on backup power, yet every green mark still represented a crew that had chosen to stay. She opened the fleet-wide channel. "The Varkun are aiming at Earth because Earth answered us," she said. "If we let that world die for saving ours, then we are not a union. We are only frightened survivors." Her voice steadied. "Make a path." One by one, united ships moved. A Prel cruiser blocked incoming fire with its failing shield. A Cathan carrier released its last drones. A Dravon battleship, half broken and still proud, pushed into the enemy line and fired at close range. They were not winning the battle. They were buying seconds. Seconds became a road. The Ashen Promise drove through it. 2 minutes remained. Then the Worldbreaker fired early. A dark beam tore from the black ring toward the jump route. It was not fully charged, but it was strong enough to kill anything in its way. The Ashen Promise moved into the beam's path. Lyra cried out before she could stop herself. The human ship caught the strike. For one terrible moment, it looked like a single hand holding back night itself. Every screen flashed white. Alarms screamed. Then the image returned. The Ashen Promise was still there, broken, burning, holding. Captain Holt spoke through static. "Now, Elias." Elias answered, openly crying but focused. "Mirror Grave is ready." Lyra gripped the rail. "What is Mirror Grave?" Holt replied, "The reason Earth was never the real target.
Then the United Worlds learned humanity had hidden a second battlefield inside the jump route itself. The tactical map changed into something no United officer had seen before. The jump routes appeared as glowing paths between stars. They were the roads of peace, used by traders, doctors, teachers, and families. Now one of those roads burned with the Varkun beam, its dark light pushing toward Earth. The Ashen Promise held part of the strike back, but the pressure was tearing it apart. Elias Reed's voice came through the static. Mirror grave opening in 3, 2, 1. Inside the jump route, silver lights appeared. At first, Lyra thought they were ships. Then they unfolded. Mirrors. Hundreds of vast human machines had been hidden in the space between routes, invisible to United sensors for decades. They turned together with silent precision. Dravos stared at the display. "How long have those been there?" Captain Holt answered, "Long enough to matter." The beam struck the first mirror and bent. It hit the second, then the third. Each machine caught the deathlight and pushed it away from Earth. Hope rose across the command deck. Then the first mirror cracked. Elias shouted, "They cannot hold the full charge." Holt replied, "They do not need to. They need to send it back." The mirrors shifted again. The beam curved through the jump route in a wide, impossible arc. Slowly, the dark light turned away from Earth and began racing back toward the battlefield, toward the weapon that had fired it. The Varkun understood too late. Their ships tried to scatter, but the United Fleet blocked them. Damaged cruisers, empty carriers, and wounded battleships held the enemy near the Black Ring. Admiral Dravos lifted his head. "All ships, keep them there." The returning beam struck the world breaker from behind. For one silent second, the ring glowed white. Then it shattered. The explosion spread like a newborn star. Varkun ships near the ring vanished. Others spun away, cut off from anchors and command. The doomsday weapon that had been meant for Earth died by its own fire. Cheers filled the bright spear, but Lyra did not join them. She was watching the Ashen Promise. The human ship had taken the first strike and held it steady long enough for Mirrorgrave to work. Now its lights were failing. Its engines flickered once, twice, then went dark. The vessel began to drift. Captain Holt's voice came through, faint but clear. "Weapon down. Finish the anchors." Then the channel cracked into static. Lyra leaned toward the screen. "Mara, answer me." Nothing. Rescue teams launched before she even gave the order. Then the last Varkun memory anchor pulsed, and a familiar voice filled the channel. "Lyra, do not come closer." It was Captain Holt's voice, but it was not Captain Holt. As the United Fleet rushed to save the Ashen Promise, the final Varkun anchor began using Mara Holt's voice as its last weapon.
"Lyra, do not come closer." The voice sounded like Captain Mara Holt, calm, tired, familiar. But there was no warmth inside it. On the bright spear, every officer understood at once that something was wrong. The last Varkun memory anchor floated near the wreckage of the world breaker, damaged but alive. The Ashen Promise drifted close by, dark, torn open, and silent. Admiral Dravos said, "That is not her." The false Mara spoke again. "United Fleet, stand down. The mission is complete." A broken human signal cut across it. Elias Reed's voice came through, weak but real. "Do not listen. The anchor copied her command pattern from our link." Lyra stepped closer to the console. "Where is Captain Holt?" A pause followed, filled with static and fear. "She is alive, barely.
Sana is keeping the core stable, but the ship is open in 6 places. Dravos turned. Send rescue craft now. Small rescue craft launched from the United Fleet. The final anchor pulsed. Every rescue craft lost power and drifted helplessly. The false voice returned. Approach again, and the human ship dies. Lyra felt helpless anger rise in her throat. The Varkun had learned one final lesson. Humans would risk themselves for a mission. The United Worlds would risk the mission for the humans. Mercy had become the enemy's last trap. Elias spoke again. The anchor is drawing power from our damaged core. If it gets enough, it can rebuild control over the remaining Varkun ships. How long? Asked Dravos. Less than 2 minutes. Lyra looked at the map. So many green marks were dim. So many crews had already given everything. Sana Vale's voice broke through, strained and breathless. There is one forgetting pulse left. It must be fired manually from the forward control room. The room went still. Everyone knew what that meant. The forward control room sat near the worst damage. Whoever fired from there would not survive the blast. Then Mara's real voice came through, faint but steady. I will do it. Elias cried, Captain, you cannot even stand. Then help me crawl, she said. Lyra closed her eyes. She had asked Earth for help, and this wounded human was still paying the price. No, Lyra said, you have done enough. For a moment, only static answered. Then Dravos opened a fleet-wide line. His voice carried grief, pride, and command. All captains, prepare to give the humans a path. Lyra looked at him. What are you doing? He met her eyes. What they taught us. The United Fleet moved one last time, not to flee, not to attack blindly, but to shield the broken human ship while the final charge began. Lyra opened her hand and looked at her son's ring. Hold the line, she whispered. And this time, every world answered. In that moment, Lyra understood the last choice would not belong to humanity, but to the worlds humanity had saved.
The United Fleet formed a living wall around the Ashen Promise. Broken cruisers moved on backup engines. Carriers with empty bays placed themselves between the Varkun anchor and the human ship. Battleships with cracked armor turned their strongest sides toward the enemy and held position. No one ordered them to die. They chose to stand. Lyra watched through tears she no longer tried to hide. For years, the United Worlds had asked who would save them. At the end, the answer became clear. They would save one another. The final Varkun anchor pulled more power from the damaged Ashen Promise. Its black surface glowed, and Captain Holt's stolen voice filled the channel again. Move away. Survival requires retreat. Admiral Dravos stared at the screen. That is what you never understood. Lyra opened the fleet-wide channel. To every world listening, she said, the Varkun believed fear would divide us. They believed grief would stop us. They believed humanity stood alone. Her voice strengthened. They were wrong. Small shuttles launched from the bright spear, then from Prel, Cathan, and Dravan ships. They could not reach the anchor, but they could carry power cells to the Ashen Promise. The cells struck the human hull and locked on to broken ports. The Varkun fired. United ships took the hits. Inside the Ashen Promise, Elias Reed rerouted the new power. Sana Vale fought to keep the core from tearing itself apart. Captain Mara Holt, wounded and barely standing, reached the forward control room with help from her crew. Her voice came through the channel. Lyra. I am here, Lyra answered. Tell them Earth heard their call. Lyra swallowed her tears.
Tell Earth we heard yours." For a moment, there was only static. Then Mara whispered, "Fire." The final forgetting pulse burst from the Ashen Promise. It struck the last memory anchor. There was no huge explosion, no bright storm. The black ship opened like a shadow under sunlight. The stolen voices trapped inside rose together, no longer screaming, no longer afraid. The child from Solace Reach spoke one last time. "We can rest now." The anchor went dark. Across the battlefield, the remaining Varkun ships stopped. Without anchors, without stolen memory, without the dead to guide them, they became silent machines in space. The war was over. Hours later, rescue teams entered the Ashen Promise. Captain Holt lived. Elias and Sana lived. Many others did not. Their names were carried back to every world the ship had helped save. 6 months later, the star map in the Hall of Necamaris was green again. Not untouched, not fully healed, but alive. Lyra stood before the leaders of the United Worlds. Her son's ring rested openly on the table before her, no longer hidden. "The humans sent one ship," she said softly. "But that ship reminded us what unity means." Outside, the repaired Ashen Promise waited among the fleet. Not above them, not apart from them, with them. And for the first time in many years, the stars did not look cold. They looked like home. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.